Hello everybody, this is Chuck again. This is Jesus is Satan, the Morning Star Part 2. We'll pick up right where we left off. I think that I've made pretty clear exactly where I'm going with this, that the Lord God is Satan, the Lord of this world, and the two stories in creation are two different stories about the same creation. But if you want to go with the Christian point of view, and by the way, I used to be a Christian for many years, and I used to be the person selling Christianity. So I know exactly what they're trying to say, and I know all the stories that are put in there to cover up what the Bible's saying. So, but like I said, this, it's all about the words of men concealing what's going on. So if you want to go under the assumption that Adam and Eve were first, all right, well, here's your next conundrum. Cain's wife. That's the whole thing. If Adam and Eve were first, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel. Cain kills Abel. Cain is banished to the land of Nod for killing Abel. And then magically he has a wife in Genesis 4:17 in the land of Nod. A nameless wife in the land of Nod. Well, who was Cain's wife? He's already left where his mother was and his father. He's been banished to the land of Nod, and Cain's wife is nameless. So who could Cain's wife be? You think it could be one of God's people from the sixth day? Oh no, the Christian church, the best excuse I've heard is that, our tiny little finite minds cannot come to understand that infiniteness which is God. In other words, don't ask and we won't tell. So don't ask, don't tell policy of Cain's wife. And it's ridiculous. It's nonsense. But they'll try and say, then after that, Cain's wife was his mother, Eve. Well, I've already made clear why that's biblically impossible for two reasons, and I'll make another third reason clear. For the first reason, she is not named. Genesis 4:17, Cain's wife is nameless, and therefore she wasn't Eve. Secondly, I've already geographically pointed out they're in different places. Obviously, Adam and Eve stay together to have many more children, as evidenced from Genesis 4:25, where she has her third child, Seth. In Genesis 5:4, where she has many more sons and daughters with Adam. So obviously, Eve didn't leave Adam in the presence of the Lord. She has stayed with him to have many more children, and therefore she can't be in the land of Nod, where Cain knows his nameless wife. It's a geographic impossibility. She's not named Eve. The third reason, Eve has made clear in Genesis 4:25, that Seth is her third child in lineage. And I'll go right from it. And this is her words. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. She's making it clear that this is her third child in lineage, directly following Abel, whom Cain slew. So that automatically disqualifies her from being Cain's nameless wife who bore Enoch, because then Enoch would have been the seed that God appointed her instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And therefore Seth would not have been the third child in lineage. But it's clear that he is. This is the third child directly following Abel, and in Eve's own words, she makes that clear. So there's your three reasons. Eve is not named, she's in a different place, and she's made clear that Seth is her third child in lineage. So then you point out these three biblical impossibilities, and then point out the scientific impossibilities of a mother and a child having normal babies. It's impossible on every level. So then they'll say, Cain's wife was his sister. But this is already an impossibility. She's already made clear that Seth is her third child in lineage, and therefore she hasn't had other children after Abel, whom Cain slew. The first mention of any sisters of Cain is in Genesis 5:4, long after Genesis 4:17, where Cain knows his nameless wife. And obviously she has her third child after Cain knows his wife. So it's impossible for Cain's wife to have been his sister. She hasn't been born yet. And then somehow you need to get a time machine, get her back in time, and then figure out a way where a brother and a sister can make normal babies. It's impossible on every level. Biblically, scientifically, it's impossible. It's really clear to me who Cain's wife was. It was one of God's people from the sixth day. This is the seventh day. The two tellings are not about the same creation. And that's where Cain's wife comes from. She is one of God's people from the sixth day, and hence why she's nameless. God didn't name people individually. So I think that makes pretty clear right there exactly why these are not two tellings about the same creation as the Christian church would have you believe. And like I said, there's all kinds of signs here if you want to see them, you know. There's all kinds of signs here. And before I talk any more about this, I'm going to talk about the word occult. The literal meaning of the word occult means to hide or conceal from view. And that's what the Christian church is doing. They're hiding and concealing from your view that these are two different creations on two different days. Like I said, you know, the biblical evidence already points out that I don't think that Adam and Eve were first. They were on the seventh day. God made people on the sixth day. And then, if you want to believe that, then where does Cain's wife come from? It's ridiculous. You're putting belief on top of belief, and there's no proof for anything that the Christian church is saying. Everything that the Christian church is saying is the words of men that conceal what's going on here. So it's all about whether you're going to believe the words of men or believe the Bible that's right in front of your eyes. You know, who are you going to believe, men or your lying eyes? This is a book, and it says what it says in black and white. This is the seventh day. The Lord God is Satan, the Lord of this world. And that's where Cain's wife came from. That's been a thorn in the side of the Christian church for 2,000 years, because they can't give you the answer. Because if they do, they'll be giving it away that these are two different creations. And that's why they tell all these ridiculous smoke screens and cover stories about who Cain's wife was. Oh, it was his wife, or it was his mother, it was his sister. It's nonsense. It was one of God's people from the sixth day. And real quickly, the next part of the Bible that clearly points out that these are two different stories of different creations is the generations of Adam list. Why does Adam change from plural form to singular form? In Genesis 5:1 and 5:2, Adam is in plural form, then it's a different paragraph, and then 5:3, Adam is in singular form. Why are they separated by two paragraphs if they're about the same creation? That's ridiculous. But it says, you know, male and female created he them, and he blessed them and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. That's Genesis 5:2. Then this is new paragraph, Genesis 5:3. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth. So there's another clue. I don't even remember what the Christian story is that's covering this up, but I know whatever it was covering up what's obvious. Genesis 5:1 and 2 are talking about God's people from the sixth day, who called their name Adam. He didn't name them individually. They were first, because they were made first by God on the sixth day. Then, separated by a new paragraph, and then Adam is in singular form, as in Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve. So, right there, it makes clear. These are two different stories about two different creations on two different days. And the reason that Adam switches from plural to singular form in the book of generations of Adam is because these are two different stories about two different creations. Everything that the Christian church says is a story that covers up what's really going on, and that's your other story that's covering up what's really going on. I'm making it clear. It's there if you want to see it. Jesus is Satan, the Morning Star, Part 2. Part 3 coming up.